rest of you too, please, if you feel that you can come by, we can keep distant from each other, but there may be some of you that can come by. If you just can come by and lead us in prayer, or give a testimony, or sing a song, whatever you can do, then everybody'd be happy to see somebody besides me and my brother on a Sunday. So that was a treat. I'm glad that we had Ronnie come and sing for us. We'll do that whenever we can, but we have probably, if we reached out, probably even Jason would come and sing for us. Linda Sue probably would come sing for us, but it's very difficult to put people in that situation. Right now, to ask people to come out into public or to expose themselves, I don't get out very much at all. I had to take part of a day this week and go to Redstone Arsenal to pick up a piece of IT equipment there, but that was a big ordeal. It took several days to set it up and make it ready, so I don't get out very much. I can drive up to CVS and they'll hand me my medications out through the window. I haven't been to see the doctor. Back several months ago, I went and had some follow-up heart tests done, but they've been asking me to come and submit some blood work for a while, and I just I feel okay, so I haven't done that. I just when I went for those tests, I just thought, well, I might go here and find out my heart's okay and we'll come away with the coronavirus. Our friend David Lowry and his wife have contracted the coronavirus, and I know that David is in the hospital. He's a former pastor in our area. I believe he last served at the Fifth Avenue Baptist Church. Last I heard, he was seeing some improvement, but continue to pray for David. And pray for other pastors, other people. We've been praying for Eric Summerford. I haven't heard how he is doing, but there are no doubt, no question, there are others, and maybe those among your friends and family. I know that Henry Crow has reported that he has lost several cousins, but there are others in his family who I hope, have recovered from the virus. I know that Kathy Taylor Irwin and her mom and dad, the Taylors, have had COVID-19. There are unquestionably others that in your family. I've had two families of old friends call me in the last 2 weeks, a different funeral for each week, and I just couldn't help them. Though I have been able to serve in that capacity in some, it was just not part of this situation that I could be of assistance, and I regret that. But keep each other in thought, heart, mind, and prayer, and continue to stay in touch with each other. Well, we're going to look further today at the book of Job, where this is part 2. We're still going to stay in chapter 1. We haven't been formally introduced yet to Job, or later on he's going to have 3 friends who are going to come actually to comfort him, but they don't offer much comfort. They pretty much believe that the reason he's had this trouble is because he's sinned some terrible sin, some secret sin against God. Believe me, I do believe that when I'm disobedient, or when I break God's laws and disobey against his rules and his statutes, that he does punish me, that he does chastise me, that there are consequences always for our sins. And sometimes I can look in my life and see that this is a heartache or a tragedy or a calamity or a crisis that I've brought upon myself because I have not behaved as I should. But sometimes there are going to be things in your life that happen to you, and you don't deserve them at all. We're going to see here in the book of Job that even God said that Job was upright and holy, that he hated evil and loved good. And yet these terrible, tragic things came into his life. He lost loved ones. He lost all of his riches and wealth and all of his material possessions. If you're going through a difficult time or things are hard on you or hard for you right now, it doesn't mean that God is punishing you or you've done something wrong. There were times when my dad would say, "Son, do you think that God is punishing me for the life that I lived before I became a Christian?" And I told him, "Daddy, I don't think so. God forgives us, and Christ died for us so that we could be forgiven of our sin. And yes, there are many consequences to our disobedience in our life, and yet I could say in my life that I've been thankful that my parents didn't always punish me for the mistakes that I made. There have been many mistakes that I've made in my life that God has blessed me instead, contrary to my activity. That doesn't make for a good policy. I think we should always try to be as God wishes us to be and as He's leading us to be, to grow in grace and mercy. But just because there's hardship or difficulty or loss or even death in your life, it doesn't mean that God is punishing you because of some wrongdoing. It may be a test, as it was, and not so much a test of you, but a test of maybe even Satan himself, a demonstration of the ways and the workings of God. I believe sometimes that even if we knew why God allows something or why God causes something, why God, pardon me, permits something to invade into our life, doesn't mean that it would answer all of our questions or that it would make a difference or that we would say, "Oh, now I get it." I think that there were many times, even if we knew God's purpose, it wouldn't be enough. Just simply because some things are just hard to bear and cannot be bared, cannot be borne. There are things that we must turn over to Him. We have to trust Him that the things in our life are necessary. If there is something harsh or hard that God requires of you, the reward will not only be equal to that later, but it will supersede that. It will be fourfold. Let's look at these scriptures again. If you have your Bible, you can open to the book of Job, chapter 1 and verse 1. There was a man in the country of Uz named Job. He was a man of perfect integrity who feared God and turned away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. His estate included 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large number of servants. Job was the greatest man among all the people of the East. Now these are a great description. He was a good person, and in Jesus' day, the day that He lived upon the earth, they believed if you were a good person, you had a good life. And when Job's 3 friends come, they say, "Well, obviously you're having bad things happen. You must be a bad person," because God would not allow these kind of terrible things to happen to a good person. His sons used to take turns having banquets at their homes. They would send an invitation to their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Whenever a round of banqueting was over, Job would send for his children and purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them. For Job thought, "Perhaps my children have sinned, having cursed God in their hearts." And this was Job's regular practice. It's important to know and to see that the Bible does not teach that God will answer all of your prayers. The prosperity gospel preachers will tell you if you'll just believe, if you'll claim it and name it and claim it in Jesus' name, then you'll have it. Well, there are many times when God says no. There are many times when we pray for something and God does not answer that prayer. What kind of father would I be if I had given my children everything that they ever asked for? Sometimes I denied them. Sometimes I said no. Sometimes every once in a while, as a matter of fact, not too long ago, I came across a little box. And I opened it up, and there was a pocket knife in there. It was it was a brand new pocket knife. And I remember that someone had given that to my son when he was about 6 or 7 years old. And I had put it up so that one day, when he got old enough to have a knife, his very sharp knife, that I'd give that to him. Well, there are probably several presents along the way for my daughter and my son. I said, you know, you can't have that right now. Well, obviously I never gave it to him at all. And you say, well, you need to give it to him now. I'm not sure if he needs a sharp knife even now. He's 32 years old. But anyway, just making a note, I don't think God's got pocket knives that he is waiting to give us. But there are times when God says, you know, you don't need to have that. I'm not going to give you that. Now, this was Job's regular practice. Now, there was not any Mosaic law about offering sacrifices. There was no prescription. There was no priest to take this to. He did this on his own, and it was something that he demonstrated. He once said, God, I want to show to you how serious I am about my prayer and my request. And the way they did that, that was the whole point. It was not that God loved barbecue or that God desired to have death and mutilation and blood sacrifice. But it was always the choice to take the prize animals of your flock and just simply waste them before the Lord. It was an extravagant way of saying, my relationship with you, God, means more to me than the value of these animals. And he was trying to, however, he was misguided. You and I can't make sacrifices for other people. We can pray for them. But if they've cursed God in their heart, there's nothing, no kind of religious activity that I can do that will prevent you from having to answer to God. There may be people you love, people you care about, maybe even your children, that you do pray for them, and you pray for their protection and their peace. But if there is something that they have between them and God, it's between them and God. There's not anything. Now, you might be able to encourage them. You might be able to assist them or guide them if they seek your guidance. But what Job is trying to do right here has no value. There are many things that we might do in our religious, our spiritual, our ritualistic life that are really just superstition. They're just vain show. And God didn't condemn Job for this. He didn't criticize Job for this. But we know that when there is something in my heart between me and God, the only one who can deal with that is God and me. One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord asked Satan, where have you come from? From roaming through the earth and walking around on it, Satan said. Now, this is obviously, as I've shared with you, the presentation. This book of Job was written by a human being to try to define and to describe or present possibilities for the way things happen when good people are caused to suffer. The very fact that here in this story shows us that this is not, that this is a human's point of view of how this might have taken place or might have been. God says, where have you come from? You know, the devil, God would never ask Satan, where have you been? What have you been doing? What have you been up to? As if he didn't know. God has no need of asking a question like that, but that's the kind of question that a king might ask if one of his subjects came into his court. Where you been? What have you been doing? We see this often throughout the scriptures that as Adam and Eve were hiding from God, God says, where art thou? What have you done? Have you eaten of the fruit of which I commanded thee not to eat? You know, those are the kind of things that a man would say if one of his children was hiding from him and he couldn't find him. Where are you? My grandmother used to go out and holler for me in the backyard. Sometimes I heard her and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes when I heard her, I didn't always come running. God doesn't have to look for us. God doesn't have to call out for us. He never has to ask us. He never has to ask us, where have you been? What have you been doing? So we're seeing here a problem through the eyes of a human being. And it's important to see that as a part of this scriptural story. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? No one else on the earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil. You see, this is another indication. He doesn't say, look at my servant Job. No one on the earth is like him who fears me. He fears me and turns away from me. He says, but no, he fears God, as if he were talking about God. The person who is making this speech is really the writer. And he is putting these words in this character's mouth. He fears God, instead of saying, he's a good servant and he fears me. He said, no, he fears God, as if he was talking about God. It's a clue that what we're seeing here in the book of Job is a human author that God has inspired to write a story. And yet we're seeing all of this through the eyes of a human author. God's permitting it. Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him, his household, and everything he owns? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. This accusation may be correct. It may very well be that, and it's obvious here in this story that God is pleased with Job, that he approves of him, and that he's proud of him. Well, I love for my mom and dad to be proud of something that I did, and I love to be involved in something that I think that God might be pleased with. But this accusation of Satan, he says, Job, you're protecting him, you're watching over him, you're caring for him. If I saw something that nothing bad ever happened to them, I'd say, well, that's why they can live the life that they live and be the persons that they are, because if something bad ever happened to them, that would change everything. He says, stretch out your hand and strike everything that he owns. Now, let me be clear here that Satan is in this story. The word Satan means the adversary. Satan is involved in this story. But here Satan says, stretch out God, stretch out your hand and strike everything that he owns, and he will surely curse you to your face. Let me show you that we can't look into this story and say, well, all the bad things that happened to Job were because of Satan. Satan did it to him. Let me assure you that even the bad things that happen into your life come to you from the hand of God. He says, if you stretch out your hand and strike everything that he owns, he will curse you to your face. Yes, Satan is prodding God. He is accusing God. He is trying to prompt God. And yet, he is in part of this story. But there is not anything that Satan can do to you or in your life that is beyond the control of God. Everything, even the bad things that happen into your life, they're under God's survey. They're under God's permission. Nothing can happen to you unless God allows it. Now that's hard because God does allow things. He says, very well. Everything he owns is in your power. However, you must not lay a hand on Job himself. So Satan left the Lord's presence. We can say, and I've heard people say, all of the good things that happen in life to you are from God, and all the bad things that happen to you are from the devil. There was a time when Simon Peter was promising to Jesus that he would never abandon Jesus, and he would even fight for him. He would even die for him. And Jesus said, Simon, Simon, Satan hath desired to have you that he may sift thee as wheat. But when you have been converted, he says, you're going to be a blessing to all of your brethren. In other words, Satan even then came to Jesus and asked permission to sift the life of Simon Peter, to bring trouble and tribulation to him. And the implication in that passage is that Jesus gave his permission. God here gives his permission for Satan to come in and take away all the material possessions in Job's life. One day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their older brother's house, a messenger came to Job and reported, while the oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing nearby, the Sabeans swooped down and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. He was still speaking when another messenger came and reported, a lightning storm struck from heaven. It burned up the sheep and the servants and devoured them, and I alone am escaped to tell you. That messenger was still speaking when yet another came and reported, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, made a raid on the camels, and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone am escaped to tell you. He was still speaking when another messenger came up and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. Suddenly a powerful wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on the young people so that all of them died, and I alone am escaped to tell you. All 7 of his sons and his 3 daughters. Then Job stood up and tore his robe. It was a way of expressing great grief. The King James Version says he rent his garment, tore his garment. He shaved his head and fell to the ground and worshipped. Saw a video several weeks ago where a young girl, young woman, had a disease, and she was going to have to partake of a treatment where her hair was going to all fall out, and she knew that, and they had said it probably would be best if you just go ahead and shave all of that beautiful hair off your head. And so as they were preparing to treat and go through the treatment that was going to treat her disease, her husband was there, a young man, had some clippers, and they were standing in front of the mirror, and they were taping it on video. And so he was helping her, and it was something that she had braced herself to do. It was something that had to be done, and he was going to help her do it. And she steeled herself, and he was helping her, and he took those clippers and he just began to shave all the way down to her scalp, just getting it all, being very careful, being very gentle. And you could see the sadness in her eyes as those locks of beautiful, gorgeous hair fell around her shoulders and fell into the sink. And he run that clippers from back to front, all around the sides, until her head was completely free of hair. And just as soon as he cut the last strand of hair from her head, he started cutting his own hair, making those strips and those stripes. His young bride covered her face with her hands, and he didn't have to cut his hair, but he did. He decided to. It says that Job shaved his head as an act of grief, an act of remorse, brokenness, and sadness. He fell to the ground and worshipped, saying, naked came I from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this life. He said, I didn't have anything. I didn't have these children when I came into the world. I didn't have any of these sheep or these oxen, donkeys, camels. And he said that it looks like at the end of my life I'm not going to have anything either. He didn't say, well, this all belonged to me. I deserved this. This was all my stuff. These were my things. They were my children. He didn't say that. He said, well, didn't have anything when I got here. I'm not going to have anything when I leave. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Praise the name of Jehovah. Throughout all of this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. Now, soon we're going to meet Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And they're going to come to him. Now, this is just phase 1. We're going to go to chapter 2 next. And Satan is going to come in and he's going to up the ante. It seems very harsh and very hard. Job does not deserve any of this. His children, there's no indication that they'd ever cursed God, that they'd ever done anything wrong. There's no evidence that they'd ever displeased God. God himself declared the righteousness of Job. These kinds of things can happen to you and me. Oh, you see, the book of Job is not written to defend God or to explain God or his actions. What the book of Job does is it holds up Job. It holds up Job and said, this is what Job did when he lost everything. This is how Job responded. This is what Job said. One of the things that is hard for me in the book of Job is that some of the things that we see about God, or what the writer says about God, don't help at all. It's hard. What God permits, what God allows. That God even allows or permits Satan to hurt us or harm us for some purpose or some reason that we may never know. There's a verse in the book of Job, and we're going to look at it. I'm going to let you know where to find it, because there Job says, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. You know, God's not supposed to slay us. God's not supposed to kill us. That doesn't sound like the thing that God does or what God should do. But what that means is, Job says, even if God doesn't do what I think that God does, even when God looks like he's failed in being God, or when God has let me down, though he slay me, even though if God, I don't deserve to die, I haven't done anything worthy of death, but even though if God kills me, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. It may say something hard or harsh about God and the way God does things. There's no answer in that, but the answer may be that Job says, well, I don't understand this. I don't know why this is happening. And this seems to be contrary to the way that I think that God is. I'm not going to say that's all right. I'm not going to say that's okay or that's acceptable. Here's what I am going to say. I'm going to trust him. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Well, that's hard. That's hard. But I tell you what, I have great respect for Job, and I'm saying, I want to be like that guy. I want to be like that guy. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. It says that he never lost his integrity. He never cursed God. He never bailed. He didn't become a different kind of person. He didn't become bitter. He didn't become angry. He didn't lose his faith or his confidence. He didn't abandon his principles because life collapsed around him. It can happen. Those things can happen. Well, I don't know what's going on in your life, but let me encourage you to maintain your integrity. Keep your principles. Make a stand. And yes, you may be able to look and say, I didn't deserve this. I didn't ask for this. I didn't bring this into my life. I wasn't responsible for this. I'm not being punished for anything I've done wrong, and yet it's happening to me. God is doing something. And even if he told us what he was doing, we might not agree with it. We might not say, oh, okay, carry on. We might say, if I was Job, I'd say, well, that's all well and good, but we've proved our point now. Let's go on with something else. Satan comes into the presence of God, and God says, have you noticed my servant Job? Later on in the book of Job, Job says, boy, I kind of wish you had never noticed me. I wish you didn't know my name. I wish you hadn't found me. I wish that you had no knowledge of me at all. I wish I'd never been born. And Job said, I somehow believe that the reason this is happening to me is because you're paying some kind of attention to me that I wish I didn't have. Said, I kind of wish you weren't focusing on me. If the devil ever shows up and God starts bragging on me, I tell God, so don't brag about me in front of the devil. Don't tell him what a great person I am, because you know what? God thinks you're a great person. It doesn't matter who you are. He loves you no matter what, and He probably has a very high opinion of you. Sometimes I'll say, well, Lord, I appreciate that, and it means a lot to me, but I kind of wish you just kind of keep it to yourself if you don't mind. Well, God bless you, folks. It was good to see Danny today, and I have the day off tomorrow. I don't have to, though I don't leave for work or go to work, I can sit around the house tomorrow if I want to. Terry and Carice and Brian and Nair and the girls are in a dance competition today, so I have the grand dogs and the grand cat. Evidently the cat has become fond of me over this stay. Not necessarily what I was looking for. Well, pray for my family as they will return. I haven't made any sacrifices for them. They do belong to God, but I pray and ask. I know that there's not anything that they may have done wrong that I can appease God for, but I know He loves them and He cares about them, but they all belong to Him. May they never be a hindrance to me, or that I might never be a hindrance to them. God bless you. Pray for each other. Remember, especially those unspoken prayer requests. God bless you all.